make my kids watch the Matrix trilogy over the holidays. All right. So
Wait,
I'm
The
going to share my
Matrix is a
screen now if that's
trilogy? I thought it was
available
just the
or as
one
soon as that's.
film.
Well, technically there's 4 films now. That last one put me to sleep, man. That was no bueno. Um, so yeah, screen sharing as soon as you can, good sir.
Yes, let me.
And since
Ooh,
nobody else has said it now that we are recording, this is an official CNCF meeting. Please abide by the code of conduct, which is to say, be nice to people.
thank you, Flynn.
All
Yeah,
right,
be nice
you
to one
should now
another.
be. You should be co-host
Open
now, Shane.
agenda. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, so let's take a look real quick at Shashar's PR and time box ourselves to like, I don't know, 15 minutes on that. Did anybody else add anything else, or are we just going over the PRs today?
I think it's just the PRs at the
Okay.
moment.
Then roughly 20 minutes each or something like that.
Actually,
Yeah.
there was one thing from Near. He mentioned that the Monday time slot is a no bueno.
Oh,
Like
right.
Oh, yeah,
nobody's
that's been bad
joining.
for a long time, yeah. We've won we just haven't gotten around to deleting it basically, but that one's been bad for a long time. We need to switch that up.
So is
We'll do that
the,
one async, I think.
but is the, I feel like the consensus was to just get rid of the Monday slot. Am I misremembering that?
I mean, at least, but it would
Uh,
be
uh,
nice if we were meeting once a week with an
yeah,
alternate so
exactly.
that
Neil
people at
wanted
different
to have it
times.
weekly.
Yeah.
So for this, yeah, we'll do that async. We'll figure that out. Probably in the new year, when Near's back. So for this one, how section for payload processing, I think the gist of it is this suggestion of having an actual processing field under rules. And I think where we kind of left off, um, there's two things that I see that are kind of problematic with that. They don't necessarily preclude the notion of doing this, but I do see a couple of issues. The first one that I kind of realized was this means we're adding another thing in addition to backend refs, filters, policy attachment. Now there would also be another thing, as opposed to being able to use one of the existing things. That doesn't mean we can't do that, but we just need to be very cognizant of the fact that if we start leaning in this direction, we're going to be adding yet another extension mechanism to Gateway API. And I can only imagine that it's going to be met with some
Resistance?
tenuous responses. So we just got to think about that. And then the other thing is one of the things we want with payload processing that was not done well, arguably, no blame intended, with filters is here, let me give you these comments real quick. Filters have this they have this concept of being both on the match level and on the backend ref level. But what we actually want for payload processors, and I mean, arguably, maybe what we actually wanted for filters, and we just didn't express it this way, is some way to express that you're going to, as part of a match, a different backend ref may be targeted. You can kind of screw with that today by using filters at the backend ref level, but then you basically have to like, I don't know exactly. I don't think we have any good documentation on how you would do that, but I think arguably what you would do is you would apply a filter to each of the backend refs that it could target. And then the insinuation there is the intent is declared by the user. It's like, by the way, any of these could be the target, but I think that's bad.
I don't think we actually have a way that, I don't think Gateway API has a way that is intended to allow
I think that's
choosing
accurate.
choosing a back end. There,
Although the putting filters on the back ends speaks to that at some level, whether it was intentional or not.
it kind of doesn't.
All
Oh,
right.
hi, Lumia and Veronica. Nice to realize that other people have joined. Um, this is this shows up a lot in the API gateway world where you often need to be very, very careful about whether you're going to allow an inline filter to alter routing decisions or not. And I would argue
Right.
that we have not, like putting a filter on all of your backends certainly does not express that you should be able to change which backend gets picked.
Yeah, I'll step back from it. It's the closest thing that it came anywhere close to it, and I agree actually in retrospect. We shouldn't say this is the way that you do it today because it's not an accurate statement. It's not intentional. But your point about API gateways is very well taken. Like working on API gateways in the past,
Yeah.
I'll say in my experience, it was uncommon that a filter would ever change a routing decision. It was more common that a filter would do something else um, to the request on the way to otherwise the same backend.
When we implemented external auth for Envoy, in fact, getting it to arranging for Envoy to support having the routing decisions changed by the XDauth filter um, was a little harder than any of us expected.
And it's horrible. Like the way the Envoy's
Oh,
route
yeah.
decision stuff works, it makes it infeasible for Istio as an example. Routes in Envoy, routing decisions in Envoy are just bad to begin with. Like it makes it infeasible for us to do like auth Z policy on a route if a filter that comes after the auth Z policy can change the route, the auth Z
Oh,
filter
yeah.
again.
You just have to not.
Just don't do anything don't do anything
Well,
important after auth.
so the way I was going to phrase that was that all you have to do is allow explicit control of the ordering of filters and never ever have more than one filter that might want to affect that. What's the problem with that? Um,
Right.
Yeah,
It's a hard
yeah,
problem.
that's a
yeah,
good illustration of how hairy this can be. Like,
yeah. So,
arguably, you'd want to be able to declare that intent somehow and identify that in a declarative way that like this may choose a route. At the
oh,
same time, from an API perspective,
yeah.
it's a house of cards.
Um, I want to digress. Uh, I want to digress in a very deliberately time-boxed fashion here because I strongly agree with Mike's comment that it would be nice if we could just fix filters. And
That's kind of where I'm coming from.
well, the
Are
question
you
that
trying to fix filters or are you trying to fix gateway? Because what we're talking about is effectively changing the mental model of how gateway works, right?
Good
so
question.
when you say gateway, I want to explicitly separate the gateway resource from gateway API in general. A better way to phrase what I was just asking was, or what I was just saying was that my preference would be I would like to fix the way filters work in gateway API's HTTP route and presumably gRPC route as well. Um, and my question to the other folks who are heavily active in Gateway API is, I don't remember why we decided to do the two levels of filters in HTTP route. Do y'all remember that or not?
Well, again, we kind of talked about this a couple minutes ago. I had the vaguest memory that this was about, well, I think that it's not clear, actually. Let me not
Yeah.
say anything definitive. I had this
So I
memory
have,
that it might be about when you choose like a certain route, but I think that if you just look at it on paper, all it really is just only apply this filter when this backend ref is chosen. The
right,
problem with that is we don't really have a backend ref selection mechanism
right.
that's good. Like you can do like weights and say like whatever the implementation wants to do, tee hee ha ha. And that's like not the same as having a way to specify. So it's weird to have filters on backend refs when you can't really do like there's not really a great way to say when this happens
Yeah, there's one
target
use
this backend
case.
ref to go back through like 2019, 2020 like meetings or something and like figure out why we did it that way.
There's exactly one use case that comes to mind where I feel like the separation is important. And that, on the one hand, that instantly makes me think that I just haven't thought about it enough, right? But the one that comes to mind is that occasionally, it I have seen situations where it is a good thing to be able to do path rewriting differently depending on which backend gets selected. Very occasionally. And if that's the only thing that any of us can think of, then I'm gonna probably propose that we get rid of that for Gateway API or, come up with something like that. But I feel like trying to preserve that two-level split is probably a non-goal unless we can come up with a reason why the split is there.
Yeah.
Or probably should be a non-goal.
I think I agree with that. Shashar, you wrote this, and obviously you have a lot of good thoughts. Do you have anything you want to say? Should we give you the floor a little bit here?
Not sure I need the floor. My approach here, again, coming from a security filtering use cases into this and trying to generalize a bit. My general feeling is that we're trying to cover every use case we can right now with this discussion on the PR. And I feel it's really hard to make progress given that.
Welcome
Wonder
to
if we can-
Kubernetes.
Yeah, I know. I was expecting that, right? But at the same time, like we all want to make some.
I'm sorry. I'm genuinely
Here.
sorry that that's your experience, by the way. I'm sorry for making light of it, but that it tends to be like that. But your
I
point is well
mean,
taken.
you're not
Like, if-
wrong.
You're not wrong. And your point is well taken that if we could just focus on the specific use cases that we want and go faster, that might be good. I think the problem we have is I think the problem that we have is the first thing that I mentioned, which is we would now be adding yet another extension mechanism. And so there's a certain amount of tension with trying to focus too much on a non-generalized use case, because if we added something surgical, I think the problem is basically that Gateway API is already too complicated. So we want to try to reuse existing things to support the use case if possible. I think that's where we're at. Does that resonate with everybody else?
Yes, it does.
The way I'm
Shahar, your point about trying to have processing preempt matches is kind of interesting too, and germane to that. Can you give me an example of something you'd be thinking about there? I mean,
So
that sounds like you want processing to be able to select a backend. Is that correct?
no.
Is there
So
more to it?
my use case for security use cases is definitely not that. Like I'm not interested in changing how the request eventually lands on a backend.
Mhm.
My only intent is being able to detect attacks, apply compliance, guardrails, and so on requests and responses.
Ah,
Okay, so I'm not trying to change the dynamics of gateway, but I do want the request itself to be processed, and
Are
the
you
response.
already
And
are you already doing this today with Gateway API?
I'm doing it not with Gateway API.
I
I'm
gotcha.
doing it against the will of certain application implementations, but I want this to be, a supported use case.
I gotcha.
Rather than
The
an
one
inline proxy.
precedent, yeah, the one precedent that I'm aware of right now is several of the cloud providers do have WAF integrations for Gateway API, generally through a policy attachment, and it's very loose. It's like a resource that says all the rules are up here in the cloud. Apply to.
yeah,
It's very loose. It's part
it's
of
very annoying is the word I
Very
would
annoying.
use.
Security is one of the use cases we wanted to kind of pull in because the AI and security use cases have seemed to have quite a bit of overlap. I'm actually
Mhm.
a pariah in Gateway API, trying to push for WAF support being a more native thing. I say pariah because it hasn't been a particularly popular proposal, but I have been proposing that for a while. And because I think gateways, go on just a real quick soapbox, I think it is extremely natural for an ingress gateway to be like, oh, I have an ingress gateway, I'm going to have some kind of WAF or firewall on that for customers,
Yeah.
for like end users. That's an extremely natural pairing, but we don't really have great support for it today. So I'm on the same page as you, Shashar. I think that it is definitely take that use case and go right at it right now and say, like, let's put ourselves in that box. I hate to say we need to do more deliberation, but I mean, I can only imagine that if we
Well,
did that and then we had to do another thing for things like semantic routing or semantic caching, which do target backend routes, that would just get proliferate as all hell. So
So
are we
so
are,
to address this for a second, my thinking here with the friction we're hitting is to me feels like uh we're missing one feature, one feature in the meta model of how gateway works, which is basically being able to re-enter gateway after processing has taken place. So you could change the request and then go at it again, apply the rules and find, apply more filters and so on.
I'm cringing because if you say that, then the Istio folks have already come up with certain ideas about what you're talking about. Um, not to
I know.
badmouth the Istio folks, but wow, yeah, some of the stuff y'all do with Envoy listeners has always fascinated me.
I understand. I'm only saying that this specific capability would solve every friction point that was raised during this conversation. Like multiple levels and being able to rewrite and then make decisions based on that and so on.
I've been wondering if we are dancing around the idea of being able to apply processing on the input side of a request coming into the gateway. And now I'm wondering if that is equivalent to what, sorry, I'm laughing at Keith's not by choice, Flynn. Um, I'm wondering if processing on the input is equivalent to re-entering the gateway or if it is not sufficient. Um, conceptually, um, when you talk about I've done a bunch of process or I've taken a bunch of action on this request. I've understood a bunch of things about this request, and now I'm going to run it through again. Conceptually, the moment you start doing that, you get into a bunch of really interesting scenarios like how do you make sure you don't just halt forever? How do you make sure you're not just endlessly looping, burning resources on your gateway? Um, there are some really weird security things that are kind of unfortunate in that
The easy
regard.
answer is you can allow to do it once. Maybe that's good enough for 99% of use cases. I don't know.
Maybe. I
And
mean, it's
then it's routing on the input and then routing on the output conceptually, right?
I wonder if it's enough to do some sort of processing on the input and then have exactly one routing pass. Um, and I also kind of wonder how I would implement that in, I mean, like making changes to say Linkerd's proxy to allow that is one thing, but I assume you could do it for Envoy, but I would have to think about how.
The Not easily. Like this is actually relevant to why I said not by choice, because
Right.
Envoy's internal listeners, you basically have to do them if you want to do anything with HTTP Connect, if you want to do anything useful. Um,
Hmm.
but there's a lot of, especially when it comes to security, there's a lot of interesting consequences to doing another filter chain pass, especially when it comes to scalability.
Yeah.
Um, so I understand that the idea of sort of being able to re-enter a gateway and do processing again would sort of at a high level solve some of the use cases. For me, I see a lot of that as I would like to try to avoid that if we can. Um, just because it's a whole new can of worms, and that's not necessarily a piece of functionality that a lot of proxies have
Yeah,
today.
yeah. A lot of proxies don't support it at all, short of literally opening a connection back to your own IP address.
Yep.
Um, and the one, I'm probably going to say this wrong, so hopefully Keith will keep me honest, but I have this memory that there was a pretty nasty scenario where you could go through, run through the listener, do a bunch of security checks, and then decide to redirect it to a different internal listener that had entirely different security characteristics without doing all the security checks on the second listener. And so it
Yes.
ended up being a way that you could bypass a lot of really important stuff. I'm glad I'm remembering that correctly. Thank you. Um,
Yeah.
and it was a very,
Hmm.
I don't remember enough of the details now because it's been a long time. I just remember looking at it and going, "Oh no, this is terrible and awful," and oh man, we have to avoid this like the plague.
Well,
Um,
everything is, right?
there's a difference between, oh, this is bad, like you might end up getting a 400 half the time if you do exactly the wrong thing, and oh dear me, this is very bad. This bypasses all of the authorization policies that I've just set up from the outside world. And this was more of the second category of bad. Um,
So
yeah.
we've reached kind of like the 20-minute point. I would like to actually, so one of the things Shashar said, if you don't mind, Flynn, I'm just going to kind of veer a little bit.
Go for it.
Shashar, you mentioned like your use case does not include routing decisions. And some of the use cases we are trying to cover do. And your sense is that we should focus on solving for the use case you have because it's a fairly standard use case, which I tend to agree with as somebody who wants to integrate WAFs more with Gateway API. In your own words, like, have you thought about how this would work with filters? Like, I'm curious to hear
Could
your
work with filters.
experience. Yeah, could work with filters. Like, can filters today nearly do everything that you need? Because they're pretty decent, I think, from a WAF perspective. You say, here's a route and here's your filter, and it's a WAF. But I'd like to hear what you think.
The solution has to support inspecting not only headers but bodies, both for the
Yeah.
request and the response.
Filters don't actually preclude the notion that you would process the entire payload. I don't know that anybody's
I don't think anybody is, but
doing a
they don't
lot of it, but
prevent it. Yeah,
yeah,
they don't
like I
prevent
know,
it.
like Istio, for instance, I think barely acknowledges filters, and actually will like, if I look last time I looked at Istio, I think there are almost none, and it will in fact not allow filters in some cases or something. I have some memory of that, but I think that's just because filters are broken at a couple of levels. But
Do filters, you can't attach filters to an HTTP route, correct? You can only attach them to rules within a route and backends within a route. Am I remembering that right?
yeah, I think you are here. Oh,
I think
at the
that's right,
top one.
yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
filters are a peer to matches and backend refs, and then are also inside the backend ref.
Appears in backend ref and route rules.
Yeah. Okay.
So I would be interested to know if this is close, if there's anything we could do to make filters cover that use case better, if it doesn't already kind of cover it, because that would be obviously a quicker win. Maybe. I mean, it depends on if we have to change something in filters, but like how much we have to change. But if that can
It
happen,
raises the possibility of a quicker win anyway.
yeah, without much proliferation of like the spec, which is something we'd like to avoid if possible. And it might even like be a good stepping stone into then saying later making a decision, because I think we have to make a decision at some point and work with the rest of the Gateway API community and say, do we accept that filters can make routing decisions? I don't know if that's spelled out anywhere. I don't think it's precluded, but it might be something that we want to contribute to the spec, like that we say, yes, this is something that is expected. And maybe there is specification that then allows you to say, if your filter does do routing, here's a list of the backends that you might route to, or here's some sort of way to describe under these conditions, I will go to this backend or these backends or something like that. Might be doable in a filter without a backwards incompatible change. Does this all sound like anywhere close to like good, Shashar?
It's close, except the fact that the actual processing will not be implemented in the gateway using a set of parameters.
Oh, I see. Can you tell? Can
So
you
the
can you help me to
traffic
better
has,
understand how you see that happening?
yeah. So
Let me go
customers
back to
would
your spec.
deploy a WAF or something like that on the cluster as an application on somewhere else, and that thing would actually filter the traffic.
Yeah, I see. That's your payload processing pipeline. I remember
Yeah,
this when I was looking at the
exactly.
PR the other day. This concept intrigued me because again, it gives you that you're declaring more, you're being way more declarative about the intent than like any of the WAFs are doing today. It's the intent is the reference is not here's the filter and here's the reference to the rules that are going to be applied to this filter or whatever. It's here's the filter to, but it's a an object and it just shoots off to some arbitrary opaque backend. So that's, I see. Okay. So if filters had the pipeline ref concept, they might be really close to what you'd need for your use case.
Maybe. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's something I think we should put that in the notes for today's agenda and make sure that we like follow up on that. Because I can kind of see that and I can see that being a good topic to follow up
Shane,
on.
can you summarize that since I made the horrible
Yeah,
mistake of reading something
I'll
else
try
while
to
you were talking?
do that real quick. But we're at 20 minutes left, so I think we should now let's do that as a follow-up. Let's take an action item. I'll put it in here in a minute. I'll open it in another browser, so I'm not doing it while everybody's trying to look at the PR. But we'll have an action item to follow up on that. It looks like there's already some stuff in there, kind of talking about that. And switch over to Keith's now for the last for the back half. Thank you, Shashar, by the way. We appreciate you jumping in and like bringing your expertise to the table and like being patient with the process. We will try
Thank
to make sure that we don't get too stuck in deliberations. Keith, do you want to say anything up front about your PR before we just
Yeah.
dive in?
So the first thing I will add, I'll say, is that I did some work to try to add a few more discussion sections. So I actually added a section on backend extensions,
Oh God, producer versus consumer.
and producer versus consumer, because I think Mike Morris and I had a good conversation about this internally, and I think it's really important that we don't conflate the backend resource. And so there are a lot of decisions that I'm putting in this proposal that seem weird when you think about it, but um, I think it helps make the model consistent if we just really think of the backend resource as being the consumer side of the producer consumer flow. A service owner does not own a backend. It's actually the consumer who is describing how they want to talk to a backend.
Yeah. When I read through this, I bought this. Like I bought this 100%. That this is the way we should probably be thinking about it.
Okay, I need to
Cool.
reread this for sure then.
Yes,
That,
because
that was my takeaway, and I think
Yeah.
it makes some sense.
Yeah.
I think too that we're probably gonna there's a good use case potentially for backends being cluster scoped objects. Fear, pain.
Okay,
Yeah.
you just completely lost any. That's it. My respect for Shane has just fallen through the floor.
Good. I didn't want there to be any.
I strawman something
It puts me on a
somewhere.
pedestal.
I forget if it was a conversation with just like back channeling with Keith or if it's in public anywhere, but it was around like splitting this into like three separate things, one of which would be a cluster scope thing.
yes, I think that
but
was in
not
the
necessarily
PR.
having backend as the cluster scope thing. Yeah.
It's a
What
discussion,
would
I think.
what would be the cluster scoped thing?
Something to basically scope like domains. So like and like something to control like FQDN scoped thing
Yes.
as the default or override if it is not defined within a namespace. So like you want
Yep.
kind of like that you want that control at a cluster level to be able to set like defaults and overrides.
Yeah.
And then you also want it within a namespace of I want to do my own thing unless I'm not allowed to.
And I think you're absolutely right. I think that cluster scoped thing is actually a front end. instead of a backend.
Yes, it
And
is. It is.
One of the issue is too strong a word here. One of the things that I'm going to be looking for when I go ahead and actually read this properly and think more about it properly is that it's easy to say that the backend resource is always the backend in the gateway API sense, right? Um, but one of the things I've started to feel is that I feel like that raises a ton of questions about, okay, what is the front end that can work with this back end? And if you're thinking about this from the gateway perspective, like from the perspective of the thing that we call the gateway resource as, oh, here's a rendezvous point that's defined to cross administrative boundary, then you have a certain amount of natural reactions to the question of what's the front end. And if you're thinking about it as a service mesh, then a lot of those natural assumptions stop being so natural. And that is deeply fascinating to me in some ways.
so, Shane, if you wouldn't mind scrolling down to the very bottom of the document, I added a section. It's sort of brief, but it talks about service mesh
Woo!
considerations. Because that's exactly right, right? So for a service mesh, you don't always have a gateway that you can use to act as the front end. This
I would
proposal,
actually argue that in most cases you won't have a gateway.
I
And
completely agree. I
the
completely agree
reason,
with you.
I
yeah,
agree
the
as
reason
well.
that I think
We
that,
do
yeah,
egress today without a gateway at all in the mix.
but also to be clear, the reason that I say that is, for example, in Linkerd land, if you have a parent ref of a gateway, we're going to ignore it,
Yeah.
right? The existence of a gateway as a parent is the cue that this is a thing that is not a mesh route. Um,
Yes.
and I'm
Yes.
I'm obviously glossing over some stuff, but yeah, it's almost it's we would have to change a bunch of stuff in my particular mesh to be able to use gateways as front ends for this. So
Yep.
yeah,
And we exactly discussed that here. So briefly, I'll talk about this. Like meshes tend to trade off sort of stronger namespace oriented tendency, where like declaring the front end any particular namespace is the only way that that front end is available in that namespace. That's sort of
Mhm.
what Kubernetes might want you to do now, but meshes tend to say like that's too much work for an operator or an app developer. Like Anna shouldn't have to do that to talk to an external service.
Right.
And so backend, you might try to use it for this mesh use case, but I'm because this proposal specifically egress gateway for AI, I'm trying to scope it and say that hey, meshes might try to use this, but it's implementation specific, and we're probably going to break this. I very much suspect that we're going to break that semantic. Um,
Yeah.
what I have some guidelines about how to how you might try to do this in a mesh to do it safely. And then the thing that's interesting about the cluster scope piece that Shaman brought up is that I said mesh implementations should consider proposing either a cluster-wide version of the backend resource or having a backend selector capability on a front-end resource. Um, which is
Which is
sort of
awesome because we can just change the word service to mean front end and it'll be great.
Right. Or and the idea behind that, I thought a decent amount, not a ton, but a decent amount about okay, should backend have a front end reference or front end have a backend reference? And I like the front end having a backend selector because
Yes.
that's actually a way for the mesh to say, hey, this front end is the IP address for all these different backends. And so if there is namespace specific behavior that happens to exist, meaning there is a different backend in each namespace that has slightly different behavior, the mesh can know which one to use based on the location of where the client is. So I didn't want to bring all of that scope of front end into this
Yeah.
proposal because I actually kind of want to start prototyping back in egress gateways sometime before I turn 50. But
Hey,
I
dude, 50 is the new 40 or something, or new 30 or something like that.
that's what they
Um,
all say. But
That
I
that
did
one hits me right in the feels, man.
but I
I
did
ain't
just
saying
want to
nothing, Shane.
but anyway,
Anyway,
on this proposal, I did want to just carve that out here because I knew like working on a mesh, I
So,
knew that this wasn't going to work, and I wanted to sort of leave some breadcrumbs
right.
for somebody to pick up, even if that's me down the line.
One
One thing
interesting
that
thing, since we're talking about
so
mesh
go
for,
ahead, Shane.
oh, thank you, sorry. I'll try to make it quick. One interesting thing, and I think I brought it up in your PR, Keith, but again, my memory is eluding me, is with gateway, with using gateway specifically, since we're talking about all these cases where you don't use a gateway, is today's gateway API gateway has no concept of traffic origination that would be applicable to like the egress use case, and I'm a little worried about that. Like I don't know if we actually should use gateway API gateway for egress gateways, in part because of that problem, because of like, well, what do we got to do? Do we have to solve for hairpinning? Like, so if somebody is using an egress gateway to inject credentials to Claude or something like that, right? And that's supposed to be only for these workloads. Are we going to add all the complexity into gateway to be able to describe how that traffic can only originate from a certain namespace and stuff like that? And that's something we'll have to think about. I digress this a little bit, but it's just something that's been on my mind.
To my way of thinking, Shane, because Linkerd does use gateway API gateways as egress gateways, right?
So does
And
Istio, by the way.
oh, okay, cool. But in Linkerd land, we approach that problem by, hey, authorization policy for talking to a given thing is a fine application for a service mesh.
Yep. That's basically what I would say.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
service
The
mesh, I think it makes sense.
Right.
and I would just sort of leave it to be implementation specific for how you implement an egress gateway. If you're someone like Trafic or Kong or whatever, this might be a great time to add a new gateway class that's for
No.
egress gateways and has different behavior for these sorts of things. I'm trying to some extent, trying to leave that question unanswered for now, because I think we do have some prior art, at least in Mesh, for how to do this, and
Yeah.
going to leave Gateway class as a escape hatch for implementations who might not have a mesh, who need to add some sort of behavior. Because I don't know that it's clear that we want to make Gateway prescriptive on how egress Gateway is going to work.
To me, it's
Yeah.
clear that we don't want to do that, at least at this point.
Same.
Just because we're biting off enough scope here. I don't I don't
So
feel the
much
need
scope.
to expand it further, you know?
Well, I feel like biting off enough scope isn't the right metaphor because our jaws aren't wide enough for what we're trying to do.
Uh,
Okay, I'm open to other metaphorical suggestions.
Sorry, Mike, I saw you had a hand before. Didn't want to move past you too quickly.
Yeah. It's basically just trying to discuss like what I was dropping in chat of I I see that there's like an immediate problem that you're trying to solve here with like the egress use case. And I want to make sure that you're able to do that in a way that is non-blocking with the broader scope and doesn't necessarily limit that broader scope. So I
Yes.
think that my concern, and some of this is just like the resource name, um, but my concern is that I don't want us to have to think about API structure in such a like forward-looking, future-proof way to cover like four other use cases. Like if you can just be able to design a thing that works for this case for now, I wanted to kind of like get your thoughts on like a parallel KEP, or something like that to address like the more comprehensive use cases, including like mesh expansion and multi-cluster, and yeah, there's a whole litany of other things, including like taking over part of the responsibilities of service backend things.
100%. And I think Morgan did a great job in the initial sketch of the schema for this, because the destination type, I think, goes a long way um,
Yeah.
in making this extensible. And like I responded to one of your points, Matt, because I think you mentioned you would like to see like a type of pod selector, maybe even instead of a Kubernetes service. I would love that as well. I think that's a natural extension here. The problem and the reason I'm not trying to tackle that in this proposal is because a pod selector field really needs a cap to allow for the endpoint slice controller to be able to read a backend and to manage endpoint
That's
slices.
that's not Sorry.
Implementations can. Implementations could. If they want, you can
Yeah.
create manual
There,
input classes
there,
today.
yeah, there is definitely prior art for creating the thing and doing the proof of concept without having the cap and without relying on the Kubernetes endpoint slice controller. Um, that said, the the lead time on KEPs and the opinions of the broader community for KEPs both imply to me that we should get to some consensus about what we want to do and then immediately start down the KEP road
Yeah.
because
I'm
I've slowly started to conclude that, well, no, actually, we are going to have to do a KEP about service or it's literally never going to get
Yeah.
finished.
Yep.
So,
Yep. Exactly.
once I got to a certain point on the schema draft, I got to the same conclusion. And
yeah.
I am trying to selfishly
Resist.
protect some of my time. Not resist, but just set expectations because like we need this whole I don't want this to become Gateway API. And it's not to disparage Gateway API, but the whole purpose for having a separate working group for AI is to be able to move forward. And there's a lot of stuff like we don't even
Yes.
have a proposal for LLM callouts, right? Oh, thank you for the time check. I want to be able to get to these AI use cases and be able to, for example, have somebody else help me with the KEP. Um, like I think front end will need a KEP for kubeproxy to be able to have, or maybe something like Antonio's IP address resource to be able to have a VIP for front ends. That's standard. There's a lot of stuff to do here, and I think I'm actually by accident nominating myself to try to solve service in Kubernetes. But I want to solve AI
I'll help.
first.
I'll help.
If it makes you feel any better, I mean, I think that at least four of us in Gateway API have been actively resisting exactly that. So you're going to have a certain amount of support and people who are willing to go in and keep pushing on that stuff too. I'm definitely one of them. Yeah,
My hand is up because of the
we're
time check.
yeah
We have
we're
3 minutes left.
yeah.
What are some good
To
action
finish,
items for us to try to take from here, Keith? Like,
well,
what do you obviously review?
so obviously Keith is going to go and write the cap. Sorry, no. But I was going to say, Keith, thank you for being the one who has failed to resist, apparently. And
It is
yeah.
appreciated.
Yeah, I'll get the KEP started in the new year just because the lead time is going to be so enormous. We're going to have to. Action
Yeah.
items.
Ping me when you start on that. I'm happy to jump into that at the beginning with you.
Okay, appreciate it.
I also might
Um,
get it started, so that you can focus on this.
okay,
Well,
yeah, we'll talk
whichever
about
of you
that.
gets it started, you know?
But yes, reviews would be most appreciated because I would like to like get this merged and assume there's no major because I fully expect to start trying to like prototype this and run into an issue with the API. For example, right now all the TLS settings are per port, and I can think of a user getting really fed up with that. I think I might need to make a change to have a high level. But my point is that I expect the API to change at least once, and that's
Oh
going to
yeah,
come out through prototyping it. And so I'd like
yeah.
to get this merged and like be able to start on a prototype whether it's using Istio or I might just rip off some of the stuff that the agentic networking folks are doing. So they've got an Envoy control plane that they're doing, and to start trying to implement backend. Agent Gateway already has like a backend idea. This might be implementable in Agent Gateway as well as a proxy implementation, and just start exploring some of the exploring the implications of the API. And I would welcome anybody else who wants to join in that effort. And then from there, once we've got that, I'd like to turn this into a get in
Yeah.
like February, early next year, because I think we've got enough here, core and gateway API, to get a get moving pretty quickly. And my hope is that the prototyping work will lead to Istio being able to sponsor it as an implementation.
Legit.
Yeah,
I love it. Huge
I was
plus
gonna
one.
say,
We're still in
please
proposed.
start
It's
lining
not
up
like
some
we're
sponsors.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Flynn. I didn't hear. I didn't catch that.
I was
Sorry,
just gonna say,
we
yeah,
overlap.
please line up some sponsors.
Yes,
And
yes. I'm
Yeah.
willing to be. I would once I get the prototype, then I would be the sponsor representing
yeah,
Istio. Right. That's part of the reason why I'm
yeah.
trying to get this merged in.
Yeah, I would definitely second the let's move fast and iterative. We've been trying to do that forever. Let's do a fix it forward mentality. Especially if a GEP or our proposals are in this state,
Yeah.
consider them sandbox. And if you really are worried about something that landed in a PR, make a section for your name here and call yourself a stakeholder, and we will make sure that you are involved in transitions before this moves into a different status. But let's merge fast. I approve this with that exact thing. It's like, I think this has enough in it to start fixing it forward and not have to
It's so
worry about
hard.
deliberating about it right now. We'll learn from the process, and I can almost guarantee you that this proposal before it's a GEP will be very different from what it looks like right here and now. So, but okay, so the call out is please review, please default to let's merge this in its proposed state unless there is something that just literally cannot work in this iteration, like it's just broken, like definitively. And think about this producer versus consumer role, because we're all going to probably want to get like alignment on that, especially if we're going to bring that to the Gateway API community. And stuff about TLS and stuff, I think, is a little bit more straightforward. Any other call outs about things that we need to specifically maybe difficult or just bigger things to build alignment on in here?
TLS. I have a section on a proposal for how to reconcile the different right there, the TLS
there,
story
okay.
and the different fragmentation. I basically say, here's what I think this resource should be for, this what I think this resource should be for, et cetera, et cetera. I know Ricardo is doing some work in Gateway API right now on TLS route. So this might not be exactly up to date or aligned with that.
Roger that.
But that numbered section of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bullet points would sort of be what I propose. And I propose some breaking changes to experimental things. So I think backing replaces some stuff that's on Gateway today, an experimental channel. So I'd really love folks to look at that.
Roger that. So big themes are producer versus consumer, how TLS would work, and then he's got something we can start prototyping and just try it out, kick the tires.
Yep. All right.
Should
And
we
now
adjourn?
Keith has fled.
Oh, he had to just drop right there and then. So yeah, please review and consider those highlights. And happy holidays, happy New Year.
Happy holidays for sure. And
Thank you
all that.
all, and Keith, even though he left, for joining this working group and helping us to make this to solve these use cases. It is appreciated.
And for the record, the next Thursday meeting for us, I believe, would be on New Year's Day. So I do not
Yeah.
believe it's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably going to be the 15th as the next time, unless people show up on the Monday meeting on the 5th.
Right.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. Most other working groups are canceling the next 2 weeks worth.
Yep.
Makes sense.
All right. Have a good one, all.
Cheers. Good seeing y'all.
Thanks much. Happy holidays.